Today we're going to talk about Bible prophecy, in particular the Antichrist. And one of the amazing things about the Bible is its ability to predict the future. Obviously, since God knows the future, the end from the beginning, He is able to tell His prophets what is going to happen in the future, and they recorded those prophecies that have come to pass. Some of them have already come to pass, and some are still waiting to be fulfilled. And so what we're going to be talking about today is those future fulfillments, what the Bible says about what will happen at the end of the world. And the prophet Daniel in chapters 2 and chapter 7 accurately predicted 4 world kingdoms that would arise. First it would be Babylon, and that would be followed by Medo-Persia, which would be followed by Greece, and then finally Rome. And in Daniel's prophecy of the 70 weeks, he actually predicted the exact day when the Messiah would be revealed to Israel. And not only that, he also prophesied many things about the end times, about the last 7 years on earth, which we call the tribulation period. The Bible predicts that there will be a ruler of the world right before Jesus returns. And during this final 7 years, we call this man the Antichrist, although he's not specifically called the Antichrist. He's called by a number of different names. For example, he's called the Prince Who Shall Come in Daniel 9:26. We know that he's going to come out of Rome, the old Roman Empire, somewhere in Europe. He's called the little horn in Daniel chapter 7, verse 8. We're going to be looking at that in just a moment. He's called the willful king in Daniel 11:36, and he magnifies himself above everyone else. He's called the man of sin and the son of destruction in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. He's also called the beast in Daniel chapter 7, Revelation chapters 11, chapter 13, chapter 19, and chapter 20. And Jesus referred to him as the abomination of desolation in Matthew 24, verse 15. And so what I would like to do is kind of give you a brief sketch of what's happening in the future, what the Bible says will happen concerning the Antichrist and the events surrounding him. And the first is this: there will be a 10-nation kingdom that will arise in Europe, and this will be the main world power in the final last days. This united 10-nation kingdom will be the major power, and this will be where the Antichrist will rule from. It's called different things in 3 different places. It's called from the 10 toes in the statue found in Daniel chapter 2, verses 42 and 44. He prophesies that Jesus will come back while this 10-nation kingdom is in existence. It says in verse 44, in the days of those kings, talking about the 10 kings that will be ruling, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. So he ties the second coming in with this prophecy. And then he talked, the 10 horns of the beast are mentioned in Daniel chapter 7, and the 10 horns of the beast are also mentioned in Revelation chapter 17. And it's talking, all these prophecies are talking about the same thing. They're talking about a 10-nation kingdom that will arise in the last days out of the ruins of the old Roman Empire. And so this kingdom is going to be headquartered in Europe. And you probably know at this time there is a European Union, and that's composed of 28 countries right now. It's a political and economic union. And they have a currency that's called the euro. It's used in 18 of those 28 states. And the euro is the second most traded currency in the world behind the US dollar. Well, the European Union is not the 10-nation kingdom, but it's very possible that somehow things change over there, and it evolves eventually into a 10-nation kingdom, which could be what's prophesied in the Bible. We don't know. Time will tell if that is going to happen, if it will come out of those 28 states. The second thing that will happen is the Antichrist will subdue 3 kings, and he will take over the empire. After the 10-nation kingdom is formed, the Antichrist will arise, and he will conquer 3 of those nations, and he will take rule over the other nations as well. In Daniel 7, he has a vision of future kingdoms that would arise during the end times. And in verse 7, he sees these different beasts, and the 4th beast that he saw had 10 horns, which is this 10-nation kingdom in the revised Roman Empire. And it says that it was different from the other kingdoms, and the reasons why he says that is because this kingdom of Rome actually has 2 periods of history. One period was at the time of Christ. but there will also be a future Roman Empire that will rule the world, and that makes it different from all of the other kingdoms. The 10 horns are the 10 nations in that kingdom. Daniel 7 verse 8 says, "While I was contemplating the horns, behold, a little horn, another horn, a little one came among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed the eyes of a man, eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts." So the little horn is the Antichrist, and the 3 horns are 3 kings in this 10-nation kingdom. Verse 24 confirms this. Let's read it. It says, "As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise, and another will arise after them, and he will be different from the previous ones, and will subdue the 3 kings." So here we see the interpretation that the 10 horns are the 10 kings, and the Antichrist will arise after this 10-nation kingdom is formed, and he was going to conquer 3 of the kings, and the rest of this will submit to him. Verse 25, "And he will speak out against the Most High, and wear down the saints of the Highest One. And he will intend to make alterations in times and in law, and they will be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time." So he's going to try to make changes in times and in the law. We don't know exactly what that means, but I'm just speculating here, but I think that he could very well may want to do away with the calendar because it's based on the birth of Christ. And remember, the Antichrist is really going to be a man possessed by Satan, and he hates anything having to do with Jesus Christ. So it may be that he tries to get rid of the calendar as we know it, or it may be that he just wants to, he has a law to do away with all Christian holidays, and you cannot observe the Christian holidays, Christmas, Easter. It could be that. And he's going to persecute the saints, it says, the believers, for time, times, and half a time. Now, I don't have time to go into today, but it really means 3.5 years. It's confirmed a number of different places in the Bible, and we believe this is the final half of the 7-year period that's predicted. It's the final 3.5 years. So number 3, the Antichrist will become ruler of the entire world. In Revelation 13, verses 1 and 3, it says, "Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed. And the whole world was amazed and followed after the beast." Notice it says one of his heads was wounded. Now I know that there's some people who say, well, the Antichrist is going to get a head wound and he's going to look like he dies and comes back to life again. Kind of like President Kennedy was assassinated and everybody thought he was dead, but he comes back to life again. That would be the picture of the Antichrist. But I don't believe that's what it means here. Notice the beast has 7 heads, and one of his heads is slain, which is the 7th head, which is the Roman Empire. So I believe that these 7 heads represent 7 world empires that have ruled the world. Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and the future revived Rome. It's what those 7 heads are. And the 7th kingdom is the future revived Roman Empire. It's the 7th head, and it's on that head there will be the 10 horns. The 10 kings will be on that head. So the wounded head means the Roman Empire looks like it's dead. It's gone away, but then it comes back to life again in the last days. And so the Antichrist is going to take control of these 10 nations that are going to be in Europe through some kind of military victory. Verse 4 says, "They worship the beast, saying, 'Who is like the beast, and who is able to wage war with him?'" No one has ever been able to bring world peace, but somehow this guy's going to pull it off. He's going to be so deceptive, and he's going to have so much control and influence over the world that people will follow him, and he will actually bring peace to the world, and they will worship him because he's a false Messiah. Verse 5 says he's given authority to act for 42 months. That again is 3.5 years. The Bible uses different terms to describe this. It talks about 42 months, 1,260 days, time, times, and half a time. It's all 3.5 years. So it's confirming in different ways that this is a literal time period that we're talking about. This isn't symbolic. This is a real time period. Verse 7, it was given to him to make war against with the saints and overcome them, and authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him. So he's going to persecute the followers of Christ, and he has authority over every nation. Again, we see he's a world ruler here. All right, number 4, the Antichrist will control all buying and selling. You know, if you're the ruler of the world, that means you've got to control the world's economy, and he'll do it through buying and selling. Verse 16, it says, he causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, the free men and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. This mark will be put on everybody's right hand, and of course, if they don't have a right hand, it's put on their forehead. And it might be a visible mark, or it might be an invisible mark. We don't know. But, you know, we use credit cards and debit cards now, which is really one step away from this. But you can lose your credit card. You can forget to bring it to the store with you. But, you know, if you have it on your hand or in your forehead, you got it everywhere. And so it seems like a good plan to have this, but it's also, we see that there's a plan to control the world's economy and control all buying and selling through this mark. Verse 17, and he provides that no one will be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. So this is how he's going to control the world's economy. Everybody has to have this mark if they're going to be able to buy food or sell a product. To make a transaction, you have to have the mark. Verse 18, here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. The mark is not going to be the number 666 stamped on everybody's hand and forehead. That's not. We see pictures of it, and that's a symbol of what it might be, but it's not going to be 666 because it says here that he is a man. The beast is a man, and this is apparently this is the letters of his name that will add up. If you add the letters of his name up, it'll come up to 666. Now, before you try to do this, a lot of people have tried to figure out who the Antichrist was by making their name come out to 666. The Bible also tells us in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 6, that he will be revealed in his time. So you're not going to be able to figure out who he is until his time comes, and then it will be made known that he is the Antichrist. Now remember, this prophecy was written 2,000 years ago. This is the most amazing thing, that the Apostle John in the book of Revelation is prophesying about a man controlling the world's economy through a mark long before they ever had computers. And they've never had the technology throughout history to be able to do this, but we have it now. The technology is here now to control every person's buying and selling. All it's going to take is a world dictator to enforce it. And it wouldn't be surprising to me if the Antichrist makes everybody in the world have their own ID number. And I think that may have something to do with the mark that will be put in your hand or your forehead. Number 5, the Antichrist will make a 7-year agreement with Israel. In Daniel 9:27, it says, that's the Antichrist, will make a firm covenant with the many, and that's Israel, for 1 week. And at the temple, that's 7 years, and at the temple he will set up an abomination that causes desolation. Now the week here, I know you think of 7 days, but it's not talking about 7 days. The Hebrew word here literally is 7. And it's actually talking about 7 years. And we have that confirmed in a number of different places in Scripture. It's talking about 7 years, not 7 days. And the Antichrist will make an agreement with Israel. And this covenant or treaty or whatever it is going to last 7 years long. And this passage says that the Jews are going to rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. It was destroyed in 70 AD. They haven't had a temple since then. They want to rebuild the temple. The Sanhedrin, which was existing at the time of Christ, you remember, they were the Jewish rulers in that day. There's a tribunal. It went out of existence in 425 AD, and it went out of existence for 1,600 years. But in the year 2004, a group of rabbis got together and they reestablished the Sanhedrin. One of their goals is to start animal sacrifices again, and of course tied in with that is rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem. There's a group in Israel, they want to rebuild the temple. And the Temple Institute in Jerusalem has spent $27 million in preparations to rebuild the temple. And many people believe that the Antichrist will miraculously negotiate a peace treaty between the Jews and the Muslims and allow the Jews to rebuild their temple. The Bible does tell us that the temple is going to be rebuilt. It will happen. But there's a problem right now. The Muslim Dome of the Rock is sitting on the Temple Mount. I've been to Israel 4 times, and I've been up on the Temple Mount. And it was built in 691 AD. If you look at the slide, you can see an aerial picture of the Temple Mount. And the Muslims will not let the Jews up on the temple to rebuild the temple. And Temple Mount to rebuild the temple. But look what it says in Revelation 11, verses 1 and 2. It says, "Rise and measure the temple of God, and leave out the court which is outside the temple, for it has been given to the Gentiles," that's the non-Jews, "and they will tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months. That's 3.5 years. There's that term again, that time of 3.5 years. So this verse could mean that the Jewish temple is built right next to the Dome of the Rock. If you look at the slide again, you can see that there is a place to the north of it where the Jews could rebuild the temple. Now, the only way that could be possible if this Antichrist has so much influence that he can make a peace treaty and give the Jews half of the Temple Mount, and then he gives the Muslims control of much of Jerusalem. And that way you have Revelation 11. Is that what it's saying here? Is that outside of the temple, outside of where the Jewish temple is, it's been given over to the non-Jews. Is that what it means? That's a possibility. The other possibility is that something could happen to the Dome of the Rock where it's no longer there. And if it's no longer there, the Jews would immediately go up and rebuild the temple there on that spot. So the question is, which of those 2 possibilities are going to happen? Are they going to build the temple right next to the Dome of the Rock? Or will it be cleared off and the temple will be rebuilt by itself? I don't know. All I know is that the Bible predicts in several places that this temple will be rebuilt, and that was one of the main signs that Jesus is about to return again when you see that happen. Number 6, in the middle of the 7 years, the Antichrist will stop the sacrifices. Daniel 9:27 says, "But in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to the sacrifice and grain offering." So 3.5 years into the 7-year treaty that he's going to make, he's going to go into the temple, he's going to stop the sacrifices. And remember, when the Jews rebuild the temple, that's why they're doing it, is to start the sacrifices again. And when Jesus talked to his disciples about the second coming, he said in Matthew 24, verse 15, he says, "When you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place," that's the temple, "let the reader understand, flee to the mountains." Now, the Seleucid king Antiochus Epiphanes did something very similar to this in 167 BC. He went into the temple, he set up an idol, and he slaughtered a pig in worship to the god Zeus. That was an abomination. Daniel also prophesied that he would do that. But this isn't what this is talking about in Matthew 24. That happened a couple of hundred years ahead of time. But Jesus is talking about a future abomination of desolation that will happen at the end of the age, right before he returns again. Jesus is referring to Daniel 9:27. And notice what he says. He says, "Let the reader understand." Now that's odd that it's put in there. Let the reader understand. He says, when you see the abomination of desolation, which is spoken of through the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. What's that mean? Well, he says that for those who are living in the last days at that time, who are reading that prophecy, when they see the Antichrist go into the temple and declare himself to be God and stop the sacrifices, he says, you better get out of there because he's coming after you. He's after you to kill you, so flee to the mountains. That's what he's prophesying in Matthew chapter 24. So Jesus calls this going into the temple by the Antichrist the abomination of desolation. Paul also talks about this in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. He says, "Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed." That's the Antichrist. "The son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God." So he's going to go into the temple and declare that he is God. So here's what I think the picture is going to look like when you put it all together. The Antichrist signs a 7-year treaty with Israel. In Revelation chapter 11, it says that when that happens, God is going to send 2 prophets or 2 witnesses who will come and prophesy for 3.5 years, the first 3.5 years of that 7 years. And during that time, no one's going to be able to kill them because God is going to protect them. And a lot of people have speculated who these 2 people are, and some people think one of them might be Elijah, because in Malachi chapter 4 verse 5 it says, "I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord." It's interesting, Elijah never died. He was taken directly to heaven, and during his ministry on earth, he stopped the rain for 3.5 years. And that is the exact amount of time that the rain is going to be stopped during the prophesying of his times in the first half of the tribulation period. Now, the other person that it could possibly be is Enoch. He's the other person that hadn't died. And in Jude verse 14, Enoch prophesied about the second coming. So it's possible that God will send these 2 Old Testament prophets, Enoch and Elijah, to earth to prophesy during that Jesus is coming soon. And they'll prophesy for 3.5 years. And it says that they are clothed in sackcloth, which would be the clothes that they would be wearing in the Old Testament. And it could be them. It's also very possible that it's just 2 people living at the end times, and they become the prophets that it's talking about. We don't know. Was it Enoch and Elijah or 2 other people? We don't know. But it will be 2 people prophesying for 3.5 years. And right in the middle, at the end of that first 3.5 years, that's the middle of the tribulation period, the Antichrist is going to be in Jerusalem, and he is going to kill those 2 prophets, the Bible says. He's going to do something that nobody else has been able to do, so everybody's going to immediately go, boy, this guy is powerful. On that same day, he is going to go in the temple in Jerusalem, stop the sacrifices, and declare that he is God. And that will usher in the last 3.5 years, when most of the plagues in the book of Revelation are going to take place. Jesus said in Matthew 24, it's going to be the worst time that's ever existed on earth. The Antichrist will be ruling. He'll be persecuting the believers at that time who are trying to follow Christ. They're going to be fleeing from his wrath. And the plagues will be poured out on the earth. And that's called the Great Tribulation during that time. And then number 7, Jesus will return at his second coming, and he will destroy the Antichrist. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 8 it says, "And then that lawlessness will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth and bring to an end by the appearance of his coming." And then in Revelation 19 verse 20, when Jesus returns, it says the beast, that's the Antichrist, was seized and thrown alive into the lake of fire. Now, if you want to know more about Bible prophecy and get into more detail on this, go to our website, makinglifecount.net. There's a number of Bible studies on prophecy. So go to makinglifecount.net, click on the Bible studies, and look for the Bible prophecy studies, and you can find out more about this. Thank you so much for watching.